Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. I've got my mini tripod out. I've got a flower pot stood on another flower pot to get to the right height so that I can get the angle of the camera close into this bloom. Now this is one of Hannah's that she would have got last year at Malvern. So not this year, last year, she didn't come this year, so this is going back to June 2022. She would have got this in bloom, and it's come round to bloom again. Now in yesterday's Everything in Bloom on the 8th I showed this bud not fully open. I believe it now is. Now this camera will focus really close in. It goes down to about 2 centimetres. It's currently about 3 centimetres away from this bloom, which is very small. Now this is a species Phalaenopsis, it's equestris. Hang on, let me check on the label that I've said that. Oh, now I've moved it. It should come back into focus when the bloom stops wobbling. Yeah, equestris. And it's the Peloric form. And this is what I call the purest Peloric form because it triplicates. So basically you've got the 3 sepals that all orchids have in some shape or form. Don't try and work out which is which on a Restrepia bloom, but or possibly even a Paphiopedilum, that gets us in a bit of a muddle as well. But basically you can see the 3 sepals. One is almost vertical and the other 2 come out at equilibrium, forming like a triangle shape in the background. But that's confused on this bloom because on most orchids the normal orchid structure is 3 sepals, 3 petals, one of which is the lip. So you normally get 2 normal looking petals, or normal-ish, and then the lip in whatever form that takes for the orchid, the specific orchid genus, or even the specific species within that genus. But on a pure Peloric form, you've got 3 lips. Now you can see those. They face away from the plant, so they are the 3 bright pink bits that are in between the sepals. That's the lip. And then the top of the lip on this particular bloom has 2 little wings and the centre of the lip, which is yellow. So that's to give you the basic structure of it. It's incredibly delicate and incredibly pretty to see, and I thought it's worth getting the stuff out to do a close-up. So that's that. Anyway, I said we'd have a closer look at that when the bud opens, but yes, it's a much more complex structure than the normal species equestris blooms would actually be. And I thought if I get this up against the black background, it should actually emphasize the colours and the shape. So that's that. And now we go on to another problem with the bloom. This isn't a problem, but the next one is. Okay, the next problem is not really a problem as such. Again, in yesterday's video, Everything in Bloom on the 8th, we had a look at this one, and I quite casually said, and here we have Shelob Tolkien. Well, here we don't have Shelob Tolkien. Thanks to Michael McCarthy for pointing it out and saving me a lot of work, well, potentially a lot of work, of going to find out what the hell it actually is. But it didn't dawn on me as it came into bloom. I was just thinking, thanks, we got some nice blooms. I didn't stop and think. I've had Shelob Tolkien in the past. I therefore have a picture of those blooms in the past. And they're not this. This is not Shelob Tolkien. It's something entirely different. Now, when you've got a hybrid, in this case an intergeneric hybrid, actually getting a good identification can be virtually impossible because of the variety that you can get within that. However, with the mass-produced intergenerics, they're cloned. So with very few exceptions, they all come out the same. So it's pretty predictable. Not totally predictable, you do get exceptions, but not to any great extent. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'll do a capture on this so that I can edit it. Not because I want to play with the colours, it's because I want to play with the size and shape of the photos. And what I'm going to attempt to do now, which is not something I'll film, it's something I will create in the software, is I'm going to try and put three blooms, pictures of three blooms alongside each other in the same shot, which I will be doing in my editing software. And I'll record a soundtrack to go with it. So we'll break off here and come back when I've got the photos organised. Okay, this next part of the video looks at pictures, so obviously this is a recorded soundtrack added later. Now, the basic principle here that I was going to do was three pictures next to each other. I changed my mind. I changed my mind as I worked on the pictures, basically to get them long and thin so that they fitted next to each other. Anyway, the first pair is the real thing, Bratonia Shelob-Tolkien. And that's not open to debate. However, next to it is my current bloom on the plant that we've just looked at in the video. I think to anybody, even a total non-orchid person, it's reasonably obvious these are not the same. They are quite different. Now let's have a think, because when you're trying to identify, especially the intergenerics from a picture of a bloom or a bloom you currently have sitting in front of you, looking against pictures on the internet, what are you looking for? Firstly, that is quite important, is outline shape. Now if you look at these two, the Shelob-Tolkien is much, much more like a true Brassia. The petals and sepals are long and thin, tapering to an abrupt point. Yeah? So that's the first thing to look at. The next thing is to look at the shape of the lip. Now if you look at the Shelob-Tolkien lip, it has a very distinctive shape. Yeah? It curls back on itself down the sides, then opens up to a distinct V shape. So that's the shape done. Next we have a look at colours and patterns. If you look at the petals and sepals on Shelob-Tolkien, you can make up your mind which is the pattern and which is the background colour, but I tend to think of this because of the edging. I tend to think of the background colour as the greeny yellow colour, and the dark colour is the patterning, which in some cases almost obliterates the background colour. So that's the petals and sepals. Now let's have a look at the lip. Now there's something quite special about Shelob-Tolkien, and it is the spots. The spots are brown, surrounded by a creamy white colour, in some cases almost yellow, on quite a pale pink background. Now the next thing I want to say is colours vary. They vary for several reasons. Firstly, there is colour variation on the plant, number one. Two, there's colour variation in the light under which the picture was taken. And three, depending on what took the picture, may even vary the colours. So we have colour variation. But now if we move over to my bloom, the petals and sepals are not long and thin. They are distinctly wider and have a almost rounded end to them. But it is a point, but it's, you see what I'm getting at. It's not quite so long and skinny as the Shelob-Tolkien. Now if we look at the background colour of the petals and sepals, it's definitely not a yellowy green colour, is it? It just isn't. Yeah? And then if we look at the patterning on the petals and sepals, the patterning doesn't obliterate the background colour. It tends to fade into smaller, almost non-existent patterning towards the end of the petals and sepals. Yeah? So these are quite different. Now if we look at the lip, we've lost that distinct V shape to the lower portion of the lip. That's gone. We have a much darker colour on the lip. Well, you could say that's colour variation. Now what about the spots? The spots are not brown, and they're edged very narrowly with white. There is no creamy or yellowy tinge to the rings around the spots. I think you would agree those are not the same plant, right? Okay, let's move on to the next two. Now, the one on the left here, with the most elaborate name of Wilhelmina Shelob Marie. I think a German or Belgian possibly had something to do with this intergeneric. Anyway, this was the one that Michael McCarthy came up with. And at first, I was pretty happy that he'd found a reasonable match at first. But again, if we look at the outline shape, it's much, much closer to my bloom. We do have wider, fatter petals and sepals. Now what about the background colour? Well, that's a lot closer, isn't it? It's definitely lost that greeny yellow effect. And then if we have a look at the patterning on mine, although it doesn't show up quite so much, we've got a dark colour, we call it a purpley brown, and it's edged with yellow, creamy yellow. If you look at the patterning on Michael's choice, the patterning is red, and it's distinctly red, and it is outlined in yellow, but the outlining is actually much more prominent. Nonetheless, this is a much closer match to mine. What about the lip? Well, we haven't got brown spots, that are good. Colour variation could allow for the change in colour, and we also have a wavy edge to the lip without that distinctive V, yeah? And we have white outlines to the spots, although the outline on Michael's choice is broader, there's more of it. Nonetheless, when I first saw that, I looked it up, obviously in a comment on YouTube. You can't leave a picture, can you? You leave a name, and then I had to go onto the internet and find it. Well, that's what I found. Anyway, so we're now a lot closer, but when you go and put a name in on a Google search and then you click on images, you just get pages and pages of images. And on that first page, because of the search I did, obviously the first picture that came up was Michael's picture. But alongside it, not next to it, but alongside it was this one. And I thought, that's a lot closer. So why is it a lot closer then? It's got a long convoluted name. This could now be registered, but this was the picture I found. Now what have we got then? Petals and sepals. We've got a pretty good match on shape. Yeah, widths and shape, pretty good. Background colour, allowing for colour variation, is pretty true. Yeah, patterning and markings. Yeah, so if you look at mine, the patterning can get quite close together in places. It has a thin yellow outline, and certainly on the sepals, the two petals, the patterning stops well before the end. Now come back to the complex name one on the left there. That matches. Yeah, the patterning on those two petals does not reach the end. Some of the patterning does close up the gaps. That's a pretty close match. Then we move on to the lip. We've got a wavy edge. We've got a reasonable match on colour, although there's always colour variation, and our spots, now we're getting closer. Okay, forget the number of spots, that will vary on the same plant. You know, one plant may have 10 spots and the bloom right next to it on the same plant's got 20. That happens, that's life and stuff. So what we've got are spots that are a close matching colour. They have a very, very close matching outline. So I can 95% certain say that the picture on the left there matches my bloom. Can I be 100% sure? No. But it's pretty close. And if that is actually registered, that would give me a proper name, and I could find some pictures on the internet to match that registered name, then I'd be happy. But that's as far as I'm going to go. Basically, what we can certainly say is mine is not Shelob Tolkien, as I said in my Everything in Bloom. And I don't think I've actually done a label for it, so I haven't wasted a label because it would be fundamentally wrong. Although Michael's choice was a much closer version than Shelob Tolkien, I wasn't quite happy with it. But this one, I'm reasonably happy that's a match, allowing for a bit of colour variation, plus the fact the picture on the right is not, the picture on the left is not mine. I don't know what light conditions were like. I don't know what particular unit, took the picture. There's all sorts of variables on that picture on the left that I wasn't in control of. However, the picture on the right I was in control of, and using my video camera in what is pretty natural light in my grow room, that is a very, very close rendition of the colours. Obviously the shape, cameras don't vary the shape, not unless you stick a wide angle on, in which case it'll jump out at you. But yeah, so just a chat on how to look at blooms when you're trying to get a match. When you've got a bloom in front of you, or your own picture of a bloom, you're trying to match it on pictures of on the internet, having done a Google search. Those are the sort of things you need to look at. And so many people miss perhaps a fundamental. I've had quite a few people when I've had a no ID bloom that have suggested what it might be. And when you get there, out of the basic outline of the petals and sepals, basic outline of the lip, colours and patterns on the petals and sepals, colours and patterns on the lip, one of those will often be fundamentally wrong. So it can't be, if you see what I mean. You have to get them all as close as possible. It'll never be perfect. Anyway, a bit of fun playing with some photos and a lot of faffing around with the editing as far as I was concerned. Well, I haven't got much else to do today. I ought to do some watering, but because we've had no heat for a while, we've had wet, miserable weather, I'm going to leave it till tomorrow. Otherwise, when I go round, I find that I'm picking up pots that don't really need watering, but they might not get picked up again for another 8 or 9 days, so I water them anyway. So I'd rather they were well on the way towards dry than still quite moist and get watered again. You're safer that way. So say you very rarely kill a plant through lack of water, an orchid, but you can easily mess up your roots if they're just too wet. Anyway, so hope you've enjoyed that little chat, looking at some photos, something a bit different. We don't always stay the same. I haven't always got that video camera in my hand. Some people think it's permanently attached, like stitched on, and wherever I go it's just there on my right hand. How close to the truth do you think that is? Anyway, thanks for dropping by. See you next time.